Jeff, what's happening, brother? How are you?
I'm amazing. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. I'm in rainy Columbus, Ohio, not sunny Mexico, although you might have some rain on the way in your direction, but hopefully no issues of safety down there. But
I'm watching the hurricane updates, and they just like all they have is a forecast, obviously, but they're just swinging the forecast further south. So the further south it goes, the safer I'll be. Hopefully, it doesn't hit anybody, but looks like we should be okay here.
well, we got a recording in memory of you if it doesn't work out, So.
If I die, avenge my death.
All right, we got you, brother. All right, Jeff, how about you tell us a little bit about yourself? Maybe take me through what you're doing right now, and then let's go back to the proverbial beginning of your story, because I think that's where everything starts for you.
It does. So I am coaching men through divorce. I've got a membership that I'm starting to help men emotionally navigate a divorce. The site is divorce-daddy.com. And the idea behind it is daddy energy it's meant to be a little cheeky, but daddy energy is that energy that men used to have, and we used to be strong, and it's that energy of I've got it. You don't have to worry about it. You're protected. I'll protect you. I protect my kids. I provide for you. Men want to be that. Women want that. And I really believe that's sorely lacking today. So my divorce anyway was an opportunity to look at myself from the ground up and rebuild what I didn't like that I saw.
And what happened during that divorce? I mean, that's the catalyst for this whole thing, right? So divorce happens, and I read through your website, and you said that things weren't great. I'm doing air quotes before that, but this was sort of the rubber band snapping for you. It made you go, "Oh shit! Like it's time to get ready to live the rest of my life the way that I want to live it, and not just the way that maybe society has programmed you to think."
I remember thinking, am I going to let this thing beat me? And I made a conscious decision not to. Like this could have been the rest of my life sitting. I call it sitting on the couch. It doesn't matter what you're doing, but not really living my life. And it's really scary to go through a divorce, and you go through the court process and nobody gives a shit about you. All they do is they just want it off their plate, and they follow some playbook, even if you decide it's not fair. What is fair anyway? But you go through this process, it chews you up, spits you out, and I went through, and I lost my house. Basically, I left with the clothes on my back, and all of a sudden I had a child support payment. And I left with that child support payment and no house. And for the first year or two, or even 3, I felt so resentful and angry. And it wasn't, and it was a daily battle. I remember there were days where I didn't want to get out of bed. And I didn't want to, that's not living. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to face the world. I was running away from my problems. And I realized that this wasn't the life I wanted to lead, and it wasn't the model I wanted to have for my kids. I would say they were the catalyst to transforming myself, to working on myself, to even making a decision to work on myself. Most people don't. I think a lot of men just give up and stay angry and resentful and escape for the rest of their lives.
Well, I think divorce is one of the most cited reasons for male suicide, if I'm not mistaken.
I think men are in crisis, and it's after a divorce, men kill themselves at a 10-to-1 ratio to women. If that doesn't signal some sort of change, I don't know what will. It just seems like that's the way it is, and we should accept it. And that's completely unhealthy.
Yeah, it's interesting. We all know the stats about veterans, right? A veteran kills themselves every, 24 minutes or something like that. I don't know
Right.
the exact number, but we've all heard that kind of refrain. But that 10-to-1 stat, I've never heard that. And that stat probably could be applied to men killing themselves after divorce, because there's a divorce attorney that I really like some of his stuff, James Sexton. He says that 56% of marriages end in divorce. So
that's first marriages.
Right. And I know there's also some like super divorcers, like guys and gals who will go on to divorce 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. So there's like some skewed statistics about how many divorces actually occur. But if you think about that 56% of divorces, or even if you just want to round to 50% of divorces or marriages end in divorce, then if you extrapolate the number of men that are committing suicide as related to those divorces, I mean, it's a frightening number. Not to say it's a public health emergency. That's a little bit of a refrain we use for a variety of topics, but it is something that, as you stated, I think men are in crisis, and I don't think that the modern male crisis is getting talked about very much in a lot of different places.
100% agreed. I think for the most part, we're expected to, well, have that daddy energy. Like we're expected to roll with the punches. And when you have everything taken away from you, that is a really hard place to come from.
So talk to me about where you were after this divorce happened. I know you said that you made a conscious decision, but it sounds like most men, not to say most men, a lot of men don't get to that point where they're able to make that conscious decision. What do you think happened to you that led you to go, all right, I'm not going to let this ruin me. I'm not going to climb into this hole and stay in this hole. I'm in a hole, but by God, I'm getting out.
I don't know that there was a single moment. Like I said, my kids kept me going. That was one of the catalysts. The reason I didn't want to stay in my relationship any longer, well, other than, the relationship falling apart, was I didn't want to model that relationship for my kids. I didn't want them to have that same kind of marriage that I did. And it's like voting with your feet, right? Like if you stay in that relationship, you are advocating for it. And I was lucky enough to meet a good woman shortly after I split, and she's been by my side mostly. Well, not mostly. She's been by my side since then. So I knew that a good relationship was possible. And I still struggled with mental health going through it, despite that support. And I think I don't exactly remember any one moment where I decided I was going to climb out of it, or what the catalyst was, other than knowing that it was possible to have better. The lowest point for me was my ex and I disagreed about how much money I would be paying her every month, and then what schedule I would be seeing the kids on. It's going through the process. It felt very much like I was asking her for permission to be a parent. And then, so we had that disagreement on it, and she took the kids away from me. And I just remember like crashing. And that was my low point. I didn't see the kids the rest of the summer because I wouldn't agree to the amount and the time that she wanted. So I had to go to court, and that took 3 months to get in front of a judge. And I just spent a lot of time alone, and it was just these moments of, how can I make this better? How do I get out of bed and feel better today? What do I do? And around that time, we got a dog, and it sounds like the simplest thing, but sometimes life is about the simplest things. And just the act of getting up and going for a walk every day was enough to just get the gears running. There wasn't like this FU moment at any point. Well, no, there was plenty of FU moments, but there wasn't like this, I will avenge everything moment.
There was no courtroom scene where, you're screaming at her, she's screaming at you in the movie, and you go, this is my moment, I'm going to rise out of this.
No, and I think if you're looking for that, you're going to be sorely disappointed.
Yeah, I think those happen in movies for a reason, because it's like, we need to articulate to the characters like, this was the moment, right? But it's funny you make mention of the dog, because I don't think that's silly at all. I mean, that's essentially the whole John Wick franchise, is like, he got a dog to get over the death of his wife, and they took the dog from him, so now he's like going on a bloodlust. I mean, but I think that's probably happen for more guys than one, where they have like a purpose, they have like a reason. I hear about like veterans too, they get dogs. There's like programs for veterans to get dogs, just like that need to be needed as a man, or just even a human being, I think is really important.
Well, it was the silly part is, it's one of those little white fluffy dogs, the ones that all the white girls have. So that's why I say it's
the ones you can't have out, like when there's hawks around, because you got to like protect them.
Exactly. That actually happened once. We were in the backyard and there was a hawk circling.
Yeah, that's always what I think of when I see those little dogs. I'm like, man, if there's birds around, like, we got to put this dog away.
Yeah, exactly. But it did keep me to that point. Yes, I was the one that walked her every day, and we took her, we would take her to the park and run her around, and that just that little act of having to get up and put on pants made it better.
Can we just talk for 1 second about the legal system? Because most people who haven't been a part of it think like, this is probably really fair, really equitable. The judge just comes in and he decides, Jeff, you're a pretty good guy, pretty good parent, ex-wife, you're pretty good too. Okay, Jeff, you get 3 days, she gets 4 days. Thanksgiving's yours, Christmas is yours. All right, everybody good? All right, deal, clap, let's go. What was the reality of that situation like?
The reality is one person comes in reasonable and says, here's how I see it. 50-50, here's a number I can live with, and we'll go from there. If one person comes in reasonable and one person comes in unreasonable, it tends to skew more towards the unreasonable. And in Canada, and I'm sure there's very similar numbers everywhere else, if you do not have the kids more than 40% of the time, you pay full child support.
If you do not have the kids,
if you have the kids less than 40% of the time, you pay child support.
So I don't know how the American system works, and I don't know what factor that is, the time spent with the children. But I know, at least based on what I understand about the U.S. system, it's a lot based on how much you make, like who makes more.
Well, that's the second part of it. We made very similar money. Like we were maybe, I made a little bit more at the time, but I ended up paying, well, actually, to begin with, a judge just said, Jeff, you're paying full child support.
And do you mind if I ask, like, what percentage of your income that was, you think?
I don't remember. I don't know what percentage, probably about 20% of my post-tax.
Okay. The U.S., what I've heard, is 1/6, and then every kid is an additional 1/6. So that 20% would be, pretty similar.
Similar, yeah. And that was a long time ago. I don't really remember the exact percentage.
Sorry, not making you try to do math here. I'm just kind of personally like wondering, like, what does life look like in this situation? And
well, it's a mortgage payment.
most Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. So like,
Yeah. So you
how
take
do
20% of
you
your
do
paycheck.
that? Yeah, exactly. That's like the amount that I have left to stay alive, essentially, is that payment.
It is probably a reasonably nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was twice, if I'm remembering correctly, it was twice the amount we paid on a mortgage at the house that I lost.
Geez. Okay,
Um,
sounds like a lot. 2 kids, though, correct?
2 kids, though, yeah. And then, so after that, we went for the first round. We did 2 rounds actually, and we did the first round, and I came out of it. It just felt like a whirlwind. I can't even, like, it literally chews you up and spits you out. I don't remember that time period of my life all that well, other than feeling emotions of despair and frustration and anger. We did a second round because I felt my ex was being difficult throughout it. She came to my house a few times, took the kids away, refused to follow the agreement. So we went back to court to do it again, because I didn't learn my lesson the first time.
Well, to your point, what you said is that the person who's less reasonable, the judgment will kind of sway in their direction. And what I would say is that's true in the United States when it comes to things like lawsuits. Like the person who is just more willing to like cram this thing forward and force you to keep going and keep going and keep going. The unfortunate reality is that you get the justice you can pay for. So like if a big business wants to sue you into oblivion, they can sort of do that. And the presumption is that if you don't defend yourself, you are guilty of these things, at least in the US civil system. So you kind of just have to bite the bullet and defend yourself. And I've been involved in plenty of frivolous lawsuits. People can just sue you for anything. They can say like, Jeff came to my house and beat me up. And like you being in Canada, I can file this in Ohio and you'd have to come represent yourself in Ohio and do all of the stuff that's just going to burn money through your pockets until some point you go, Alex, I'm just going to give you 10 grand, go away. Like, unfortunately, we don't have a system that's set up to avoid that yet.
That's exactly it. I was going to say something to that. Please don't sue me for that, though. I won't.
I personally will not. I try to stay out of court as much. You have to do something really bad to me to get me into court because I know how it goes. Man. It's a miserable place. It's so stressful too. Like, you know, like I said, I've been involved in these frivolous lawsuits. They make accusations about us and our company that are so insane that we're like, gosh, like, how are they even allowed to bring these forward? But you still just like get that like knot in your chest and your ugly feeling, and you're just like, oh, this like anxiety of like, I don't know what's gonna happen. Even though I'm like, I know we have like the money, like we can fight this case. Like they're asking for maybe 5, 10, 15 grand. Like we have the money, it's okay. But you just get this anxiety that's so difficult to manage. And gosh, I can't imagine being, you know, living with that for multiple years at a time. So I could understand how that legal system could really take a toll on you mentally and physically.
Well, part of it was, and I think this is a standard playbook for, well, I hate to make this generalization, but it seems like it happens to a lot of men where the other side accuses the man of some sort of abuse.
Yeah.
And then that's the unreasonable side. That this happened to me. I was accused of emotional and verbal abuse. Now we argued 100%. We argued. So if that's emotional abuse or verbal abuse, that's almost every couple. But that's part of the playbook. I think you come in and you swing that axe and you're kind of painting the other person. Like I'm a victim. This he said this to me. And then I feel like the system wants to defend itself against, the system is almost protecting itself against those accusations. So it's siding with the person who makes that accusation.
Mm-hmm. Well, there was also the parental presumption that was a law in the United States, I think like up until like maybe 30 years ago. And it was presumed that a young child would stay with the mother. And some men came in and went, wait a minute, like, where is this coming from? But from what I've heard, there's still a lot of that just lingering around, that people presume that, well, the kids have to go to the mother. Like, well, why would they go to the father? Like, they need to go to their mother. And that's where the term the unfit mother came from, because in order to beat that, you had to prove that it was an unfit mother who was actually not able to take care of those children. And the men or the man should be the one who takes care of the child.
And I find that strange because it's typically it's the father's involvement that determines the course of the kid's life. If a father is involved and it's a healthy relationship, the chances of that kid leading a good life is much higher. Like you can look at stats, 98% more likely to graduate.
Yep.
Boys with absent fathers are five times more likely to be incarcerated. 75% less likely to become pregnant as teenagers. Like
Yeah,
it goes
I
on
got
and on.
them. I got them on your website right here. Substance use. Adolescents with involved fathers are 42% less likely to use drugs and alcohol.
Yep.
Obesity rates. Children with present fathers are 33% less likely to be obese. Mental health. Children with involved fathers, 55% more likely to enjoy good mental health and well-being. Social skills, 45% more likely to develop strong social skills. Risky sexual behaviors. Teens with involved fathers are 50% less likely to engage in risky sexual behaviors. Juvenile delinquency. Absent fathers increase the risk of juvenile delinquency by 17%. That actually seems not like a small numbers compared to what you might think. It's better emotional disorders, 40% less likely to suffer from anxiety. Academic curiosity, 70% more likely to graduate from college, 39% more likely to earn mostly A's, 40% less likely to repeat a grade, and 60% less likely to be suspended. Yeah, I mean, it's important. Now, I guess I would wonder what some of those statistics would look like with, like, if you are doing a control of like only living with a mother and only living with a father. And because I think most of these are saying that one parent household not as good as two parent household. And I don't think many people are making that argument really anymore, that a one parent household is just as good as a two parent household. I guess
I don't have those stats, but it is, if I'm recalling correctly, it is worse for a single parent household. However, a single father is much closer to two parents than it is a single mother.
I know especially young boys have a difficult time having a single mother. And let's just say it here. We're not calling anyone out.
No.
Like, if you're a single parent, like, that's a tough situation to be in. You may have put yourself there, you may not have. It may just be, circumstances, death, a divorce, that you're going to be better suited to be in a single parent household than a terrible two parent household, right? But the stats are definitely clear that a boy living with a single mother, it's very difficult for that boy. And that makes sense, right? Like, it's harder to connect. And I would guess that that's maybe, somewhat true with a single father and daughter also. The same is true also with boys in classrooms with female teachers. They have a much higher rate of like acting out and being sent to the principal's office and having difficulty learning. Because
I
again,
didn't know that.
yeah, and it's actually kind of a bad situation, Jeff, because almost all youth teachers are female. So there's more fighter pilots in the Air Force that are female as a percentage than male kindergarten and preschool teachers as a percentage.
Interesting. I did
Yeah.
not know that.
Yeah. So and also boys are treated more difficultly than females are when they have a female teacher, because the female just senses like, well, Jeff's acting out, like he's, he has ADHD, or he just can't control his energy, or he's violent. But male teachers don't really like associate those things. Obviously, if some of those things are happening, it's a problem, but they don't react as strongly to them. They kind of let, as you would, boys be boys.
Well, you grow up as boys grow up. Sorry, let me start that again. I think that's playing itself out now in college. Aren't there more? Isn't it like 60-40 now of women graduating to men?
By 2030, they believe that 2 out of every 3 people in college will be a female. Yes.
So
And
how is that? How is that good for society?
no, it's actually crazy, because 20 or 30 years ago with Title IX, we said like we need to like level the playing field. Like, we need to get like women into college. We need to get women into sports. We need to give women opportunities. And nobody predicted that instead of making it 50-50, they would tilt the scales far in favor of females. And there's some logical reasons why that happened. We didn't see them coming, but now it's pretty obvious that females mentally develop much earlier than boys. Something like the impulse control of a 16-year-old girl is equivalent to like a 27-year-old boy, or something of that nature, which totally makes sense, right? Because like a girl in a high school class, like you never hear them like cracking jokes loudly, or like making fart noises, or like, trying to pull their buddy's pants down or something. Like, those are all like boy related tendencies, because they don't quite have the impulse control. So what does that manifest in? It manifests in boys that are not as engaged in academics. They don't concentrate as well. They don't exhibit conscientious behavior like girls do. Like, I need to get my homework done tonight. Boys are like, I don't care. It doesn't matter. This teacher's stupid anyways. So women are kind of rising to the top of these classes, and vis-a-vis, they're the ones who end up going on to college. And Jeff, one other thing that is kind of a meta thing to be concerned and think about is that most women don't want to date a man that makes less money than them. Like, the stats associated with women saying like, I would date a man that makes less than me are like astronomically higher than a man. Like, guys don't generally care how much money a girl makes. You're like, oh, she's a waitress. You're like, yeah, I don't, but she's super attractive, right? Like, I would totally date her. Whereas girls, if you're like, yeah, I'm a data scientist, but I'm dating a guy who's like a bust boy, they're gonna be like, no way, not gonna do that. And that manifests in some crazy ways. So the fear, Jeff, is that as men kind of bump out of some of these health, education, HR jobs that are becoming more prevalent, and as blue collar work becomes a little bit less dignified, and also automation pulling a lot of those jobs away, women will end up making more money than men, and they won't be attracted to those guys that they're making more money than. So it's kind of the modern mating crisis.
Didn't I read something about that in 2030? Something like, I'm making this number up probably, but something like 50% of women are going to be single
Well, there's
in the US.
Yeah, and there's the worrisome, if you want to go even one level farther, it's like the declining population through birth rate in the United States. So like, we are not birthing at replication rates. We do have some immigration, which is offsetting some of that, which I know there's a whole nother conversation about that, but that's just the reality of the situation, is that we are not repopulating at stabilization levels. So what'll happen in the future when you add all these additional things in? People are just generally waiting longer. The economy is slightly tougher to live in. Housing's more expensive. Childcare is like through the roof. Like, how do all these things manifest in us keeping our population stable? There's a lot of questions to be answered. Fortunately, the United States is like 10 years ahead of countries like Japan and Korea. And I don't know if you've seen, like, I think it's either Norway or Hungary, that if a girl has 4 children, they like get lifetime exemption from income taxes. There's like a lot of that that's going on in some of these countries who are starting to see like birth rates are dropping. Like we need to act now, because what you don't want is a society where there's not enough young people to take care of the old people. And then there's not enough young people coming in to sustain the economy. Like you have 30 restaurants in your town, like you really only need 10 right now. So it's like now businesses are closing. Housing is like overstated in a certain town. Now you got like vacant houses. Like there's just all sorts of issues associated with this. And people are worried about like too many people. The fear of too few people, I think, is actually a lot scarier.
Agreed. I so doesn't it feel like we're being divided then? That we're given that, you know, I'm working in the divorce field, given that there's so many divorces and it feels like so many people are ending up alone. Doesn't that feel like a deliberate choice, or that we're being pushed in that direction?
It's hard to say. I I generally don't attribute to conspiracy what could be just attributed to stupidity. Uh, Not to say that people are stupid because they're not like getting married, but I think your story is one that people hear and go like, "Well, shit, why would I want to do that?" Like that sounded terrible. Like Jeff sounded like he was, on the verge of some really bad mental thoughts about where his life would go. So I think people hear that and they go, "Geez, well, like maybe I'm not ready for that, and maybe I'm not ready to have kids," and people delay having children. I'm not sure exactly what the single cause is, and there probably isn't a single cause. But yeah, it is worrisome that we can't seem to get into good, healthy relationships and have kids and live out our lives that way.
So logically, um, let's. I want to take it back to the importance of fathers. Logically, though, and kind of to my point about this feels deliberate, and I'm not going into conspiracy theory land too far, I hope. Um, Given how important fathers are to kids, does it not just logically follow that they should be involved with their kids? And if they're not, what's like, why not?
Mhm.
Like, there can't be that many bad men out there.
Mhm.
I just don't believe that. There's not that many bad men out there that they need to be every other weekend fathers.
Mm. Yeah, I would agree. I would think absolutely we need to find ways to get men involved in children's lives.
And then one more point on top of that, 50% of first marriages fail. These are round numbers. 60% of second marriages fail. And then 70 plus of subsequent marriages fail. What's in, if something has such a high failure rate, why are we doing it over and over again? And something like 80% of people try a marriage again. Like they don't give up.
Mhm.
Why why are we doing that if it's so dangerous? And why is it so dangerous to do it?
James Sexton would say that it meets the legal definition of, negligence. It's like, if you're doing something that more often than not results in physical harm, mental harm, emotional harm to someone else, that's negligent. Why do we keep doing it? That I don't know, Jeff. I'm a single guy, I'm not married, so you got at least one under the belt, that would be, your area of expertise. I think people think that it signals some form of adulthood. I think people still are leaving behind the religious stigma that, hey, if you have a kid before you are married, like, you are immoral somehow. And then I think maybe it just some people believe that it signifies, like, a lack of commitment. Like, if you're willing to have a kid with a person, but not get married, like, well, why not? Well, why don't you wanna get married? Like, are you not prepared? Are you not ready? Are you still dating around? What's going on there?
maybe their eyes are open to the system.
Well, I agree with you there. So while I'm on that topic, talk to me about your thoughts on prenuptial agreements because you've been through this. I assume no prenup previously.
No, no prenup previously. We didn't have all that much to begin with. Prenups. Thoughts on prenups? I everything I've read about them says they can be poked holes in. I'm not, this is not my area of expertise, but I think if you're going into a relationship expecting that failure, I think that you're going to have a bad time. Now there are lots of people who think that it's going to protect them and it doesn't. So that might not be your best move.
Hmm. I guess my stance or counter to that would be, I know you said going into it, the expectation is going to fail.
Yeah.
I would just say, hey, we're at the best point in our relationship that we've ever been. We've just decided we're going to get married. This is so exciting. Like, let's just talk about what happens if things don't go the way that we plan. Like, you love me, I love you. We're doing awesome right now. Let's just talk about that eventual hurdle. Like, I don't ever want to get sick in the future and get cancer. But if I did, what would life look like for you? Like, I don't plan on dying, anytime soon, but maybe I should have life insurance just in case. That would be kind of my stance on it, is just, and my buddy, I was talking to my buddy. I love him to death. I was like, hey man, like, you're pretty successful. Like, I think your girl's great, but like, you should probably like think about a prenup. And he was just like, yeah, I don't know. It's kind of late for that. And I'm like, well, no, you got like 4 months till you get married. Just like bring it up. And I think he didn't really say this, but what he didn't say was, I don't really want to bring that up to her. That's going to be awkward. I'm just not going to do that. And I'm thinking to myself, like, okay, so first and foremost, this is like your future wife. So there shouldn't be any conversation that's like awkward or that awkward. But if you're not able to like have like one hard conversation with her, like, isn't that sort of a red flag in and of itself? Like, if she's going to freak out when you bring that up, it's like, is she going to freak out when you forget to bring home dinner, or like because you stayed out an hour late with your friends, or because like you want to go on a trip without her? Isn't that a red flag that you guys can't communicate with each other? So I think actually it's a sign of strength of a relationship. Maybe I have an odd perspective on that, and maybe I have to do a lot of pitching that to a girl.
Well, maybe that's the difference between my first relationship and the one I have now. We talk about all of that stuff, and you're absolutely right. It's the signal of a strong relationship. But on top of that, what happens when she decides she was coerced into signing that prenup?
Yeah.
And then a judge throws it out.
Could happen, obviously.
It does happen. It happens a lot. And not only that, one more point to that. I think money, truly believe money is the easiest thing to make back. You don't get time back.
True.
So I would rather cut bait and just go on to the next thing. What's the opportunity cost of fighting for years in court?
Yeah.
Versus just going and making the damn money.
Yeah. Yeah, I dig it. Unless that prenup, specified, you get this, it's clean. Everyone can agree on it. It maybe does. Again, I'm not saying it's perfect 100% of the time, but from what I've heard or understood, as long as you don't, like you said, coerce her into it, you say, hey, you got to get your own lawyer. Like, you got to get a smart counsel who's able to represent you. We don't have the same lawyer. We have two different lawyers. Technically, we're on opposing sides here, but we're doing this in a friendly way, shape, or form. That's my recommendation to all my friends is, hey, just like, let's go into this with eyes wide open. A lot of relationships do end in divorce. I'm hoping it's not yours, but also, like, why are you being a hero saying like, nah, I'm not the one who's going to get a divorce? Like, what makes you think that? What makes you think you're so
half of your friends will?
Yeah, a bunch of your friends will get cancer. I'm not going to get cancer, dude. No, no. It's like, what makes you say that? I'm healthy, dude. And it's like, okay, well, you're healthy today, but we're talking about like 50 years from now, when you're 78 years old, like, how healthy are you then? Like, are you somehow still going to be impervious to prostate cancer at that point in time? So, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm just like very logical, reasonable, and I try to rationally think through things, but that's been a default and a downfall in some of my relationships too.
You have to consider the emotional side of it. And if she feels slighted or coerced, then that's the truth of her reality, and she will fight for that.
So that's kind of preemptive to the actual marriage. Preemptive to the actual marriage would be finding the right partner.
100%.
Talk to me about what you've learned in regards to finding the right partner and how you think about that process.
I think of my current wife. We're not technically married, but we've been together 11 years. We call each other husband, wife. Not like, hey, husband, but in public we introduce ourselves as that.
Mhm.
Um, we, I think of her as a partner and sort of that captain first mate sort of dynamic.
Mm.
So I can rely on her to do things that we both agree on, and it just seems like we're on the same page about things. So I don't know if there's a better way to get to know somebody than to go through hard times with them.
Most definitely.
And if she sticks by you through those hard times, then you have a good connection.
Yeah, go on a couple vacations together where shit doesn't go right.
Yeah, and if you're at each other the whole time, your relationship probably isn't going to work out. After I split, I needed some time to myself, about a year after, and I just went and took 6 months and traveled the world. And my now wife came with me on that. And there were all sorts of things that didn't go well, and I remember we snapped at each other quite a few times. But at the end of the day, we kept coming back to each other.
Mm.
And it's the decision behind having that commitment that keeps that relationship alive. If you don't have that commitment to coming back to each other, then you're screwed.
Well, I guess you can have the commitment to come back to a person, but what if that commitment is sort of like your first marriage, where it's like, "I'm committed, but this thing isn't working."
But we weren't committed. That was the problem.
So what give me some difference, like, what the dynamic was there between, like, you're saying what
With the first one or the
yeah,
second?
yeah, what's the difference between these 2 relationships now?
I hadn't done the inner work on the first one,
Mm,
and I think both of us went into that relationship um, through the lens of emotions. So I think she went in. Well, I won't speak for her, but I think I was weak then, and I was easily manipulated. So I think that's what maybe I don't know. I don't want to speak for her, but I think that's a bad place to start a relationship from.
mm,
Now I think I'm not perfect by any means, but I'm a lot stronger now. And strength doesn't mean it's this way or the highway. Strength to me means you stand by your convictions. You argue for what you believe in, and I don't mean argue in the argumentative sense. Just stand up for what you believe is right. Although if somebody presents evidence that their way is better, then go with that. So wisdom is strong beliefs weakly held, and I think if you can come from that, your relationship is more likely to succeed. Doing the inner work means getting rid of the stories from your past that stuck around or that are still there, and you're probably not aware of a lot of them.
Mm.
So if you had, when you were in high school, you had a girlfriend who cheated on you, you're going to think that every girl is going to cheat on you. Or if she starts, you might find that story to be comforting. So you keep reliving that story. Or another one is, let's say you had a mother who was absent, or you didn't connect with your mother when you were younger. You might seek that same dynamic out in a relationship. And then you're building that relationship on that sand of a shitty story.
Have like attachment styles come up for you a lot? And have you thought about the way that people's different attachment styles kind of pull each other into bad relationships?
I try not to do that because I prefer to think of people as individuals, and I don't mean I'm looking down by any means. It just, you can say, what are the attachment styles? Avoidance,
anxious,
anxious
avoidant, insecure.
attachment. Yeah,
We obviously all have traits from all.
yeah. But I think that paints too wide of a brush, and your experience is your experience. Your emotions are your emotions. So to say anxious attachment, like, what is that? That just puts you into a box, and that box might not be entirely you.
Yeah, I would think that you would want to think of it as, I have some tendencies
Sure.
are attributed to anxious, or do I have maybe a lot of tendencies that are anxious? The sort of fear, I guess, that I've heard is that an anxious attached person and an avoidant attached person get together. One person, like, isn't really ready for serious love, serious relationship because they have more avoiding type characteristics. The other person's anxious. So when they don't get that, like, love back, they, like, cling harder and harder, and they, like, push harder into the relationship, and that pushes the avoidant person away. So it's sort of like magnets that can't attract to each other, butting up against the wall. And it's not to say that that's what leads to divorce, but I think a lot of people start from a place where they, as you stated, haven't done the mental and internal work to get over some of those hurdles of attaching to a person in a secure way. And like you, I don't necessarily know if it's gospel, but I think I have seen some of those characteristics in various people.
I would agree that I had some of them, but it's important to get outside of yourself and recognize those patterns. So that's the only way you can start to break them.
You said that you found a, quote, good woman. That's what I wrote down here. What does that mean to you?
That means we can, what that looks like is we can notice those patterns in each other. And when we are retreating inside of our emotions, we can say, hey, you're doing this. And the other person doesn't take it from ego. That takes a hell of a lot of work to get to that point. But that's the commitment I was talking about earlier, to recognize that the other person has your best intentions at heart, and they are not trying to hurt you. And that they value the relationship over their own individualistic pursuits. And the other thing I will say is that if you imagine three sets of circles, you got two like this, you got two overlapping just like this, I forget what that's called, and then two overlapping. If you're like this, meaning you're spending all your time apart, then you're not in a relationship. Like that's you split up. If you have a little bit of overlap, if you're spending 40% of your time together, and then the other balance of your time pursuing your own thing. I think that's a healthy relationship where you each have your individual goals, but you are still committed to the relationship. That is a healthy dynamic. But then if you have those relationships where you're both doing everything together, you wake up together, you go to sleep together, you go to, dear God, go to work together. That sounds horrible. You commute to work together, you just do everything. Eventually you're going to get sick of each other, build resentment, and end up apart like that.
Mm. The way that I've heard it described is there's the you, the me, and the we. And
Yep.
they're all three independent things. And it's kind of funny because the you and the me fall in love with each other, right? Like you fall for a person because of their individual and unique characteristics. It's like, oh, like Jeff's so fun. He loves, surfing, but I don't like to surf, but it's so cool that he's into surfing. And it's like he plays blackjack like on the weekends and he's actually pretty good. He wins some money. It's so cool. And then the thing that tends to happen for a lot of people is they get into the relationship and then they're like, great, I'm in the relationship now. I'm not going to do any of those things anymore that make me myself. Like
Yep.
that person fell in love with the you portion, like the unique parts of you that make up your individual. That's like what was cool to them. Not that you were at their beck and call whenever they wanted something. And I think that is part of how a lot of people end up in bad situations in relationships because they're like, I don't feel like I know myself anymore. It's like, because you don't have a self. There's no you and me anymore. There's just a we. It's like those couple that go everywhere together. They go on vacation together. Like the one couple's mad at the other for trying to go on vacation without them. Oh, well, you don't want me to come? It's like, no, I love it when we're together, but I need to have some of myself.
You're going to go out with the boys?
Yeah, right. Right. What are you guys going to do? Are you going to go to a strip club?
Yeah. Who are you going to see?
Yeah. How late are you?
There are women there, aren't there?
How many guys are single?
Yeah. The other thing I will add to this, it's not quite at that place, but I think a good relationship is when you can see the other person with both of their good parts and bad parts, and you still decide to be together.
Mm.
So you see their weaknesses, their flaws, you see their positives. Everybody has, most 99.9% of people have equal positives and negatives. And it's important to see the other person for both of those sides. If you can't, if you only see their negative sides, then you're going to end up in resentment. You only see their positive sides, you will end up in infatuation. True love is being in the middle of that and seeing both sides. Think of the yin and yang. Equal dark, equal light.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people who are dating now, they have so much choice, parity of choice. Like, I don't know when's the last time you were dating, but now if you want to date, you just get on the app and you just start swiping and you're just like, okay, she's cute, she's ugly, okay, she's kind of attractive. Okay, I like that she's into sports. No, not her. And then you just keep going and going and going and going. And before you know it, you're like, I've seen like 300 girls that are in my location and my age bracket that are single. Like, how do I possibly just pick one of them? This is crazy. And the joke is, it used to be, if you met someone who was a baseball fan, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool, you're into baseball too. Now it's like they're a Red Sox fan. It's like, oh God, they're a Red Sox fan. Forget them. You kind of have lost that connection of mutual respect because you're like, I can find a baseball fan. There's so many baseball fans out there.
You go on social media and you see the ick lists.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's an ick.
Can be, yeah. Especially when there's 100 people after them that you could go on a date with if you just tried a little bit.
What was that stat again? By 2030, 60% of people are going to be alone. Well, I don't know what it was, but something like that.
I could see it. I mean, just with like people pursuing their careers and some of the things that I made mention of, women earning more money, not necessarily wanting to date down. Men feeling lost in the dating market. There's a whole nother thing about the certain group of men who get a lot of hits on these dating apps. It might be a little overblown, but there's definitely a statistically significant thing there that the bottom group of men are sort of getting left behind. There's more men who have cognitive impairments like autism. So they're sort of getting left behind, having trouble in the dating field. There's a lot of things going on right now that are making it difficult to date. Maybe the hardest time ever, because maybe it's the easiest time ever. It's a bit of a paradox.
But for a certain percentage of the population, it will be the hardest time, and that's how you get. But that's how you get those incels, MGTOW, red pill,
black pill, blue pill.
yeah, all of them. Blue pill is, I don't know, all of them. I think are toxic. I don't think they're a properly balanced worldview.
MGTOW, for those who don't know, is men going their own way. They're basically just men who are like, we don't need women. Like, we're just not even going to like pursue women.
Did you see there's a women's side to that? What's
yeah.
it called? 4B.
What is it?
4B movement.
Oh, I don't know. I've never heard of 4B. I know there's a pink pill, which is like the women sort of equivalent of one of these, where it's like, we just don't need men. We're just not going to associate with men.
4B is the women's equivalent of MGTOW. Maybe pink pill is the equivalent of the red pill. I don't know.
Somewhere in that radius, both of them. Yeah, there's all these communities of people who are out there and they're finding solace and talking to other individuals who are similarly struggling. And like incels get made fun of a lot, but there's a researcher that I've listened to quite a bit. He's like one of the world leading researchers on like self-identified incels. And the part that isn't as funny is a lot of these are autistic young men. And there's a high percentage of people who are non-white. So it's like, how are we going to deal with that? Like, what? That's maybe not as cool to make fun of nowadays when you have like autistic and non-white men having trouble in the dating market. And I think there is some statistical significance to like people that are minorities have more trouble on dating apps. So it's like, geez, like, what do we do with that fact? It's just it's a wild world out there, man. It's a wild time to be dating. You talked about men. What do you think's happening to men overall? I think you wrote down that the male energy is lacking right now. Where do you think that's coming from?
I think a population is easier controlled when it is when it's weak. And I don't want to get, I'm really not a conspiracy theorist, but I do have, a couple of these thoughts around dividing people. But look at how fathers particularly have been portrayed over the years in sitcoms, any TV show. The dad is always the incompetent one. Homer Simpson, what was it? What's the Family one? Not Family Guy. That's not what I mean. The
Family Guy. Peter's obviously also.
No. Well, yeah, obviously that one, but
American Dad, and then there's also Bob's Burgers.
Yeah. Many of the modern sitcoms. What's the one I'm thinking of? With they've got like 4 kids, blonde wife. Phil Dunphy. What's that?
Modern Family. Yeah,
that's the one. He's a goof. TV commercials. The guy is always like, "Oh, I washed the dishes with, sandpaper," and the wife's always like, "You."
Well, there's also a lot of that going on right now in the superhero movies. So that was like one of the things about Top Gun is that Top Gun was just like crazy successful, and Hollywood was like, how did they do this? And it's just like you had like a strong male lead that was likable, like had a problem, went in, solved it, and like got out of there. Whereas a lot of the movies that like Marvel was spinning off and various TV shows around it, they were doing like female superheroes. Mm. And there's actually an interesting thing, not to say female superheroes are bad, but it was always kind of, and you talk about the hero arc, we can get into that here in a second, but it was always like the person is, maybe successful and then they become down on their luck and then they have to rise kind of through the ashes, the Phoenix story. That was always sort of what the male equivalent was. Like, look at Rocky, like down on his luck, gets his fight, has to battle, like ends up kind of like winning in the end. And a lot of the female protagonists, they never had to like struggle through. It was like you always had the power. You just needed to believe in yourself. And it's kind of like portraying a bad message, honestly, to women, that like you don't have to struggle and go through the hard times to get to the other side. It's sort of just like you were always great and you didn't need to do anything. That's essentially
You just
exactly
had to believe in yourself.
that's exactly what the Wonder Woman story was with Gal Gadot. It's like you're great. You were always the greatest in the world. You just had to like believe and put yourself out there.
Agreed. And doesn't it help boys to see those stories about men struggling and overcoming something rather than just getting something because they believe in it?
And this is kind of the difficult topic around, men's mental health and men's well-being. Is everyone goes, yeah, but like you're forgetting about women, you're forgetting about minorities, you're forgetting about a list of 100 different people, and it's like, no, I'm not. Like, both things can be true. Like, men can be struggling and women can be struggling, just in different ways, or they could just both be struggling in the same way. We just have to recognize that it is a real thing. And like, we're not bad people for talking about there are problems out there that, yes, historically, like white guys had it a lot better than the other people, but that's not to say there are no problems. Like, let's not just act like there are no problems because you're a little more concerned about someone else's particular problem.
Agreed.
Talk to me about the hero's journey, man. I love that on your website. What does that mean to you?
So I'm reading the book I'm in the middle of right now is Iron John. Have you read that?
No.
Great book. It talks about the mythology behind the story Iron John. And that is a story about how a boy went from being a prince to a pauper and growing back up. And there's this figure in it called it sounds a little weird, but the hairy man, the wild man. And he's extremely hairy, and but it represents the wild side of the boy. And it's about coming to terms with that wildness inside of ourselves. Now, there's the concept I wanted to bring up was that of a catabasis.
What is that word, catabasis?
And it is a specific part of the hero's journey. And it's the part where you're in the darkness, you're in the shit.
A catabasis is a journey to the underworld.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it is the part where you actually grow. So you can turn away from it and run away from that the rest of your life, or you face it. So to me, I don't think you just go through one catabasis. I think that any journey you go on, you start a business and then you go through a divorce and then someone close to you dies. Those are three separate catabasis that you're going to go through. But in order to come through on the other side and there's always going to be gold inside of it, to come through with that gold, you've got to face that catabasis head on. Now, up until I've been reading this book, I've been calling it the baseball bat moment. And everybody goes through a baseball bat moment in their life. And the baseball bat moment is, and sorry to throw another term at you, the feather, the brick, and the truck. Sometimes life gives you the feather and it's like, hey, pay attention to this. But everybody ignores the feather. Everybody just thinks that's just a bump in the road, we'll ignore it. Then you get a brick and it hits you a little harder and you kind of pay attention. And most people ignore the brick even. But then you get the truck and the truck comes at you and you can't ignore the truck. And that is life's way of bringing your attention to something that you need to fix. And then that's what kicks off your hero's journey. So as you go through the hero's journey, you go through these stages. Catabasis is part of it. And I think it's probably the most important part of it.
It's interesting because you bring up this catabasis. This brought to my mind misogi. Does misogi mean anything to you?
I've heard the word. I don't think I know what it means. How do
So
you spell it?
essentially, misogi. I heard about this actually from a fitness coach, Michael Easter. Great book that you probably love, The Comfort Crisis. One of my favorite books of all time. But he talked about this misogi. Essentially, it was a ancient story, and these stories are common across history. I'm just about to start the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it's essentially like a hero's journey, right? The stories, they believe, like at least 5,000 years old. So it's one of the longest continually told and running stories throughout human history. And essentially, this story goes that there was a man and his wife died. He might have been a god, but he tried to go into the underworld to get her back. And as he goes into the underworld to try to get her back, he finally battles through all these demons that are trying to pull him in and keep him there. And he finally gets to his wife, but he realized that her flesh has been eaten and now she's in herself not human any longer. Really, there's no point in bringing her back at this point. It's sort of done. So he has to turn and run out of the depths of hell, and everybody's grabbing at him trying to pull him back. And then finally, when he gets to the other side, he dives into a cold river to cleanse himself of all the evil that he has just kind of had on him. And that's sort of the parable, is that you go through the journey to cleanse yourself of everything that has essentially happened. So this fitness coach, what he said is he'll do it once a year. He will do a physical like test of some nature that for him, I think he says you have to be able to like essentially not prepare for it. So, and you have to have a 50-50 shot of accomplishing it. And you also don't talk about it. You don't tell everyone about it because it's not like a look how tough I am kind of thing. And then I think his other rule was don't die. So don't do something so hard that it kills you. But I love that. And I do all sorts of stupid, physical endeavor. Tomorrow I'm doing one on the 4th of July, a swim and a run. So I think that there's something to that, whether it's a physical journey to sort of the underworld, or as you probably went under, an emotional journey. These stories have been told throughout human history that we have to do difficult things in order to get to the other side and be cleansed.
I think that's part of. We used to have rituals, right? And we don't have them anymore.
I was going to bring that up. Yeah, we don't do these like rites of passage and or like becoming a man sort of things any longer.
Iron John talks about that. We don't do those rituals. There used to be rituals around becoming a man where we had to almost get permission from the older men to age into, well, not age, but be accepted as a man. And I've been doing a bunch of rituals. This might not sound exactly like the misogi you were talking about, but we did a temazcal here in Mexico, which is like 3 hours in a. It's already hot as balls here, but 3 hours in a clay dome, and you just roast. I was angry. I was so angry by the end of it.
Oh yeah, just raising, just your blood boiling.
There was this tiny woman, and she kept singing, and she was like having a great time. She was in the middle of it. She's singing, and she had water. She'd spray us with it every now and then. But she was the one standing between me and the door, and I was just so furious at her for not being done. But afterwards, it felt just incredible. You beat that. You don't drink for 3 hours, or you have like little sips of water, but you don't. You're not comfortable.
Yeah, and I think those rites of passage are something that they had a reason for existing. And I don't think all of them are great. Like, there's ones where you get stung by bullet ants, like, every day for, like, 100 days. Like, I don't really know if you need to do that.
It
Um,
makes you tough.
it would definitely make you tougher. Might, provide some cognitive damage longer term, but who knows? I don't know if all of them are great, but I think that what it did was, 1, you had to have a connection with older men, like, not in
Yeah,
a weird way. That's everyone freaks out when you start to talk about that, and that's actually a problem too, is that there's sort of this, uh, pedophile assumption that if a man wants to spend time around, like, young people, like, he's instantly weird, which that was not a thing, like, 40, 50 years ago, that the assumption was there, like, if a
I think
kid.
that assumption is disgusting. I
Yeah.
think how are you going to get kids to grow up if you don't have that guidance?
It always was that if a young man's dad died or wasn't in the picture, everyone else in the community went, "Well, hey, Jeff, I know dad's not around anymore, but, like, I'm gonna kinda take you under my wing. I'm gonna show you, like, here's what I do. I'm a blacksmith. I'm gonna show you how that works." And provide some, like, community fostering. It takes a village, right? But now we're just like, "That's crazy. Why would anyone wanna, like, take care of another person's, like, kid, like, don't spend time around them." So that is a really unfortunate thing, that we don't have younger men spending time around grown-ups any longer, other than like a teacher. But it's like, do I really respect that teacher? And then you have your dad, but your dad's just like a different person in your life. Sometimes you're like, dad doesn't know what he's talking about, right? And I think they know that one of the most significant influences is not necessarily what your dad does, but it's like what all of the parents collectively in your community do. So, like, the aggregate income of your community has a far greater impact on your income than it would just your individual family's income. And part of that is just like, you're around people who are successful and you see different opportunities. And, oh, well, Jeff's a banker. That's maybe a good job. Maybe I could do that. Um,
Sort of like you're the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with, sort of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, these rituals, you have to be able to prepare yourself for discomfort. Like, unfortunately, I think, like, we see this in colleges, that, like, these young people were never prepared for any discomfort. So, like, I don't wanna go down the rabbit hole, but, like, trigger warnings when they're going to learn about difficult things. It's like, dude, by 18, 150 years ago, you would have, like, been doing 8 hours on the farm. You would have had to, like, ride a horse 10 miles into town, buy stuff, ride it back. If you didn't buy the right things, dad's like, "Go back. Don't care. Go back right now." You would have been through all difficulties of weather. You would have been through hardship, maybe like hunger, all of these things. And that's before we even get to, like, a ritual of, like, adulthood. Now, like, the most difficult thing you ever had to go through is, like, getting out of high school. It's like, that wasn't hard. Like, that was pretty well established for you. So I don't know what the line is for something like that. People have talked about, like, forced military service. I hate big government, but I'm not
Mhm.
totally against, like, between 16 and 19, everyone in the United States, like, has to go do, like, ROTC and learn how to fight a little bit, learn about, like, firearms, learn about, like, how to change a tire, like, what to do in a survival situation. I think
You're
we
not
just
going
need
to
to.
go wrong teaching your kids a martial art.
No, I think we'd be a lot better off if we, instead of, like, coddling the youth, we could push them a little bit. But that's tough. That's tough to do on an individual basis. It really helps a lot when it's systemic in nature.
Um, I was trying to think of the name of the book, and you just said coddling. So, The Coddling of the American Mind.
Yeah, Jonathan Haidt. I've listened to that one. Yeah, and he has a new book, The Anxious Generation, which is a lot about social media. But yeah, absolutely, that was it. Like, there's helicopter parents and there's snowplow parents. Where snowplow parents plow all the obstacles out of the way of their children. So instead of
That
pushing them to do
doesn't help the
hard
kids at all.
things. Yeah.
So, wouldn't that be one of the things that fathers do is challenge their kids, and that's why it's so valuable, and it's why um, kids with fathers around tend to do better because they get challenged earlier on. And I think that's one of the signs of having higher empathy is when a father wrestles with his kids and they learn to play and fight in a safe environment. Like a good dad's not going to hurt his kids in that situation, and the kid knows how far he can push.
Mm-hmm.
So, and the kid learns he can be safe getting in discomfort.
Well, as I said earlier, I mean, like the whole boys being boys thing, like I'm not advocating for like preschoolers full out fighting each other, but I think that was pretty common like 20, 30, 40 years ago. You'd go out to recess, maybe you'd like play basketball or you'd wrestle, or like if somebody said something to them, you might like try to tackle them. And maybe 50 years ago, it'd be like, yeah, we'd have fist fights at recess. But I think we've become like really divorced from violence, which I'm not saying is like a bad thing. I think violence is bad, but also I think a lot of people don't know the reality of like life, like that maybe there are dangerous people and things out there. And if you're just like talking shit on social media, like you don't have the thought like, oh, this person could actually like beat me in a fight. There's always people are less willing to really be super critical of you in person than they would be like via chat or via email or via online. It's like, all right, you're here with me, Jeff. Like, say that to my face. Let's do it, brother. Like,
I'm not a keyboard hero. I did encourage, well, not encourage, it's not the right word, but my kids beat the crap out of each other when they were younger. It was like,
as long as it's not crossing like the line, like, you know, no blood, you know, probably. I think that is a good thing to like get a little bit acclimated with the physical reality of the world. And again, I don't have a kid, so this is easy to come from me, but maybe someday.
No, I think that, and I used to tell my oldest, because he outweighed my youngest by quite a bit, maybe not quite a bit, but enough. But my youngest caught up in size and weight, and now they're pretty equal. So, you know, you learn a few things.
Yeah. You just said martial arts, and I just started doing Muay Thai, and it's been really interesting. But if I could go back in time, I wish I started as a kid. There's a 15-year-old in there who can just kick so hard. I'm like, geez, like, why is this kid so like tough? Like, he's gonna be so far ahead. I'm 32, he's 15, and I'm like, geez, imagine if I would have been doing that when I was 15.
I did boxing a couple of years now, and I got my youngest into it. That kid can throw a mean cross, so it's and he is tough too. So there's no downside to it.
Yeah. So what are the tenets of divorce, Jeff? I got the kind of things pulled up about your tenets of divorce, but maybe you just want to talk me through them.
They are some guiding principles that I came up with, some philosophies for the work that I do.
Okay.
So the big one is divorce is war. I just brought it up, so we can talk through all of them. Divorce is war, but the war isn't in court. It's not with your ex. It's not any of that. The war is with yourself. It's with yourself to get off the couch and be a better person, to do that inner work. Whatever that inner work is, just do it. Do hard shit and survive.
I think that's probably good advice, whether it's divorce, whether it's pre-divorce or post-divorce. I think doing that internal work is something that many people don't think about. And it's tough because it's like, where do I even start?
Well, most people don't know how to navigate, and that goes back to those rituals that we don't have anymore. I think those would have taught a lot of people how to navigate those difficult situations. A lot of people, a lot of men especially, they don't do hard emotional things. And divorce is probably the first really difficult thing they have to face. And they don't have the emotional strength to face it. And so, of course, it blows up. Next one is put your own oxygen mask on first. So you can't be a good father unless you know who you are and have done the emotional and inner work.
Mm.
Yeah, imagine those dads who drink, they sit on the couch, they don't do anything, they gain weight. They're the dads who haven't done that difficult work yet.
Mm.
And they're saying that's okay, that's the type of life their kids should be leading. And they're the ones that say, do what I say, not what I do.
Mm.
And that's such a weak place to lead from.
Yeah. And also, kids are so visual; they're going to have to look for an example.
Yeah. You want me to keep going through these?
Yeah.
When a divorce happens outside of the classroom, the gym saved my life when I was going through it. It was one of those things. I wake up, walk the dog, go to the gym for an hour in the morning, lift some weights, get angry, and then head home.
Mm. It's funny, like how many guys, with girls too, they get the breakup body, right? It's like, I'm gonna channel this energy into what? Like exercise now. Hey, I love it when people are exercising.
Take full responsibility for anything and everything happening in your life. Doesn't matter what your ex did. She cheated on you. How did you get in that situation?
Mm. Yeah, that's a tough one, obviously, for people to say, like, it's my fault that my partner cheated on me. But I think to your point, the reality is, well, the relationship clearly wasn't working, and you're at least 50% of that relationship. So what were the things that you did? And maybe, who knows? Maybe you could have never avoided it, but the thing you did is you picked that person. Like, you didn't see the red flags. You
There
didn't.
were a million red flags along the way to my divorce. How did
Exactly.
it, it's my fault I missed them.
Yeah,
And fault is too strong of a word. Well, no, it's not. It's my fault I missed them, and don't let it happen again.
mm,
The crop a relationship bears is more than children. It grows men, women, society, and shapes human nature. So this is what we were talking about earlier around it takes a village. You're forming the next generation of society as a parent. That's a pretty heavy responsibility. So don't screw it up.
mm.
A man shows his love through sacrifice. Sacrifice made in vain are poison. The antidote comes when you find meaning. Have you read the book Man's Search for Meaning?
Yes, Viktor Frankl, certainly read it.
Frankl,
Yeah, legend.
legend. The hardest part of my divorce was when it was like, why am I here? What's happening? Like, what's the point of this? This just feels like misery.
And for
When I
those,
started to find the meaning behind that misery, that's when I was able to make it take flight and really get out from under that divorce. Finding the meaning behind that suffering is a superpower. So looking for that gold.
mm,
Think of a yin and yang. You can look for comfort, but you'll attract challenge. If you seek out challenge, you'll attract support. So learn to look for that support that you're receiving in the challenge,
mm,
or what you're going to get out of that challenge. So I lost my house, access to my kids, had a new bill payment that was basically a mortgage payment. Let's go. That's a challenge. Let's find out how I can beat that.
and as we talked about the hero's journey, there's no story if, like, this guy was doing great and he just, like, kept on doing great and boop, movie's over. It's like, that's not
Yeah, it's
interesting.
got to be a challenge.
Gotta go through the challenge.
Luke Skywalker doesn't beat Darth Vader just not having a challenge.
Mhm.
has to go and train and lose his hand before he can win.
A man shows his love through sacrifice. Sacrifice is made in vain or poison. The antidote comes when you find meaning. Yeah, you hit that one right on the head with Viktor Frankl. For those who don't know, Man Searching for Meaning, he was a Jewish man during World War II who was imprisoned in the Nazi concentration camp. And he wrote a book after getting out. But all the while throughout, he just kept having this belief in himself that A, he would get through, and B, he was going to do important psychological work on everything that he had experienced. And man, if you want a motivational book, there's not many better than that one.
The book asks the question, I think it asks the question, why did some people survive the concentration camps whereas others didn't?
Mm-hmm.
And to give the answer away, but I still suggest reading the book, is having something bigger than you to live for.
Yeah.
So he had that book that he had to write. The next one, a father's presence in his children's lives is objectively beneficial. Now, let's not be, somebody else asked me about this and they were like, well, there are some men. Yes, there are some men who are bad for their children, but this is on the whole, a father is objectively beneficial to his children's lives. And that goes back to those stats we were talking about earlier. He's the one that challenges his kids and teaches them that they're going to be safe when they're challenged. So I don't understand why you would push a father out of his kids' lives. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We talked about this, red pill, MGTOW, 4B, etc. are toxic. All of those movements are rooted in emotion. Red pill is rooted in anger, and I think it's natural to go through this. I went through a red pill phase. Red pill is anchored in anger. You're angry towards women, and you're never going to have a deep connection. You're never going to have that positive, deep male-female relationship if you are angry at them. You're always going to be on the defensive. You're always going to be putting those walls up. So learning to dissolve that anger and let that anger go is what's going to save you.
Well, I think also to your point, taking responsibility for everything in your life. I think big part of red pill is you export responsibility to like genetics and mating and dynamics.
It's imperative.
Yeah. Well, I'm a little bit fat, that's my genetic lineage, and I'm not gonna be able to get a girlfriend because girls like guys who have six-pack abs, and it's girls' faults for that. It's like, that may be true. So what? Like, what are you gonna do about it? You're back to where you started. So what?
Absolutely.
We're all born with what we're born with. You just got to make the best of it, brother.
And get out there and do the work.
Absolutely.
And then finding the gift of the divorce, and there is always one. I promise you. There is a gift. It's your job to look for it. That's whenever you face a challenge, I think that's your job to find the gift inside of it.
I love that. Jeff, I think that's a fantastic place to call a stop, man. Where can people check you out and learn about some of the things that you're doing and helping men and women, presumably, through divorce, if that's something that they feel like is meeting their calling right now?
I am at divorcedaddy.com, divorce-daddy.com.
And how do people generally work with you? Is it one-on-one? Is it through courses? Is it a mixture of those things?
So right now, up until now, I've been doing one-on-one coaching, but I'm starting a membership, like in the next probably after the hurricane hits, I will be opening the doors to the membership. But the idea there is there will be courses in there, but the idea is to find that camaraderie, find other people who are going through what you're going through, hold them accountable, and get them to do the hard work they're avoiding.
I think that's great. Just like we talked about, it takes a village to raise a young person. I think there's nothing wrong with community for older folks too, to have people who've been through what they're going through.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you, brother. I think you're doing important work, man. Keep at it.
Thanks, Alex.
All right. Be safe in that hurricane, my guy.
Looking forward to it.